Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have prepared 3 brand new stories, starting with one in which there was an altercation between neighbors. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Neighbor trespassed and was bitten. Crap has gone off the rails. Pitchforks, fences, lawyers, oh my! My next-door neighbor of 12 years has a lawn care business and has done my yard the entire time I've lived here. He has always checked with me before going in the backyard, except this time. We were out of town a couple weeks ago. The neighbor, let's call him Joe, and his friend, how about calling him Ray, were doing the mowing, edging, and weed eating of the yards in their route. Joe came to our door and rang the bell. No one answered the door, and the dog, Poochie, barked for at least 90 seconds solid. Joe and Ray decided to enter the backyard fence anyway. Poochie went out the pet door and bit Ray on the leg. Ray chased the dog with his weed eater and yelled. Ray left and returned with a pitchfork. He stood at the back door screaming for the dog to come back outside so Ray could bury him, and that it was time to die, mother effer. Did I mention I have all this on surveillance video? Anyway, I get a phone call from the neighbor's wife informing me Ray was bitten and going to the hospital. When we returned home 2 days later, Ray and Joe come over and demand I pay the medical bills. Apparently there was a puncture wound that required a Band-Aid. I declined and asked why they came inside the fence without permission when Joe had always received explicit consent before going out back. Joe said he assumed someone was home even though there were no cars in the driveway and no one answered the door. Clearly, this guy uses an entirely different logic algorithm than I do. Joe and Ray stomped off back to their home next door. Half an hour later, Joe sent me a text message informing me he was taking down our shared fence that is technically on his property. Huh? Because he couldn't shake me down for medical bills, he's removing the fence to punish me? This guy is an irrational, unreasonable bully. The fence was removed on Saturday, and I'm currently getting estimates for a replacement. And I received a letter from one of our local ambulance-chasing law firms asking for my homeowner's insurance info. F off. You'll get that info only when I'm legally compelled to disclose it during discovery. Crazy. This is the inspiration for a new fence. No HOA is awesome. And our second story. I'd be happy to cancel that order for you. My ex-wife worked as an expediter for a huge manufacturing conglomerate. Part of her job was smoothing over glitches, disconnects between customers' needs and the company's systems. One day, a railroad called. They had a locomotive out of service because a key part had broken. There was a 6-month backlog on the part and none in stock. She investigated and found that the part took weeks to manufacture, and every one they could make was slated for new production. In fact, every locomotive had a promised ship date, and the company paid penalties to the customer for missing the date. This was relayed to the customer, who pounded on the table, threatened, whined, and pleaded. Finally, the company offered a compromise. If the customer would pay the penalty, they could buy the part from an upcoming new build. The first purchaser willing to take the deal was 3 months out. The customer took the deal. The part was $100,000. The penalty was half that. Since the locomotive was a $5 million asset, the company still came out ahead. 2 months later, my ex receives a letter from customer's legal department. They've decided they'll not pay the penalty and the company can take it or leave it. She freaks, meets with her manager and the company's legal department. They decide, nothing lost, we'll use the part on the new build. Company legal sends a letter to customer legal telling them the contract is canceled. Have a nice day. Have a nice day is how lawyers say, F you very much. 1 month later, customer contacts my ex asking when the part will be shipped. She told them essentially 6 months after you order it, and have a nice day. Customer wails and moans and panics. It turns out a purchasing manager didn't want to pay the penalty to expedite the part and told legal to threaten the company with not paying the penalty just for the part. Legal apparently heard deliver an ultimatum, not start negotiating. To make matters worse, neither the purchasing manager nor the repair manager was notified that the order was canceled. The customer's locomotive stayed out of service for 9 months because a purchasing manager wanted to save 1/1000th of the purchase price. Minor details changed to cover my ex. 1, totally not a railroad. 2, not a locomotive either. Sounds like your ex-wife's company handled it just right. And our last story. Now you are unemployed and almost homeless. The backstory. My best friend throughout high school and I both enlisted in the military. I went Guard, he went Army Reserves. We talked in our senior year about a town a few hours away that had multiple gold mines and an amazing economy. We talked about renting a spot out there and going to work at the mines to save up some cash and get a good start. This was just idealism, and we had no intent to actually follow through. A few years go by, I married my high school sweetheart. He married some girl. I don't know how he met her. I worked my way up through restaurants while in the Guard, and my district manager offered me a raise, moving expenses, and a promotion within the year if I moved to the gold mining town to open a new restaurant. I jumped on the chance as the pay, $40K salary, with a promotion to $65K within a year, and $3K for moving was great at 20 years old. This is where the crazy starts. I told my friend, we'll call him Jay for jerkwad, that I was getting moved to that town and that my wife and I planned to buy a home there and settle down. He never really got his crap together by this point. His dad died while he was at basic training, and he stayed with me for a good bit. My wife and I felt bad for him and said he could stay with me for a bit while my wife finished college and he could try to make a living there. He got excited, thinking it would be his big chance, and was so grateful, for a time. We got to Elko, and for the first 4 to 5 months, he, his wife, and I stayed in a long-term hotel while I waited for my wife to finish the semester and then to pick a home/finish escrow and all. This drained my pocket, alongside buying goods for the three of us, but Jay would contribute some from his 2 days a month of duty with the reserves, and that helped some. Needless to say, I blew through a lot of my salary taking care of them, and somehow they just couldn't find work. Well, I was hiring for a new restaurant and had to take on over 100 people, so I offered both of them jobs. They started eagerly, but very quickly realized that being a waiter is more than just writing orders and goofing off. They immediately became a huge issue and would often boast that they were my friends and that they were the best at the job and deserved whatever things they thought themselves entitled to. Their first write-up came within maybe 2 weeks at most. They seemed incapable of doing the most basic things and weren't putting the thought/time into figuring out the job, despite me trying to train them and coach them. They made me look terrible. I ended up having to fire them after a month and a half or so because they refused to do side work and somehow showed that this restaurant, rhymes with pennies, was too hard for them to handle working for. I left that job to work at one of the gold mines, my work history and ethic having secured me a highly paid and amazing position. At gold mines like this, you get hired as a position, but unless you're an engineer/management, you start off just doing menial labor. Think nonstop shoveling tons of ore for a 12-hour shift. Made military seem like freaking cake. They do this to prove your work ethic. I made it into a crew in 3 days. Only one person made it before me. We had our own home by now and moved in maybe 2 months earlier. Jay was still with us, but had still never found another job. My wife was now with us as well, and he obviously made her life hell. She and I are Mormons and don't drink or want to go watch the movies they're into, so they get the idea in their head that my wife is public enemy number one. They started talking crap to her and treating her terrible while I'm at the mines working, rotating shifts, 4 to 5 hour bus round trip and 12-hour shifts, to the point she stopped leaving the room unless it was to make dinner for me when I got home. She didn't talk to me until it was getting bad. Here's where Jay and my wife get into a war. Jay doesn't like where we keep our dishes. He rearranged the cups. Faith didn't talk to them anymore, so she put them back and left a note asking not to move our cups. Jay then moves every other dish and waits. My wife told me about things by this point, and I walk into the kitchen after a long shift where I pulled 2 hours overtime on top of my shift and the commute, so I'm like 21 hours into a hellish day. Nope, he's been living with us rent-free and eating our food, playing Xbox all day on our TV, and taking up the entire living room. I call him in, and he sees me in the kitchen and gets this stupid, self-satisfied grin. Cue a huge fight. I ask why the hell he moved everything in my home despite my wife, and why the hell he couldn't be grateful for the nearly year of free housing. I rent this house for $1,500 a month now, the jobs I got them and they threw away, and why they didn't go to any of the job fairs, how I got my mine job. It should be said by this point, I also was in a major car wreck, and despite my injuries qualifying me as disabled, I pushed my body to the limits to keep my job and stay in the National Guard. He starts screaming, "You have no idea what she's like when you're not here." I reply, true, but sadly I know exactly what you're like when I'm not here. This is her house. You're just a guest. He then picks up the footrest thing for my nice recliner and chucks it across the room in a tantrum. I tell him he's done. He needs to GTFO now. I won't tolerate him breaking my crap and getting violent. He screams that he'll leave, but you better help me get my stuff out tonight or I'm not leaving, smugly. I tell him that, no, I'm injured and don't owe you a damn thing. Jay yells back, you're so B-made, acting like you're all hurt and crap. Freaking female anatomy part. I shoot back, at least I can provide for my family. Your pregnant wife's gonna be living in a box if you're the provider. But then again, IDK if you could hold that down either. He started getting up in my face and I told him he could stop threatening me and leave or I'd grab my gun and ensure his threats stop. He leaves and calls two people he knew nearby that for some reason liked him and his wife. The man in that couple loudly threatening me while grabbing Jay's crap, but I just sat outside my room, wife was inside it, with my gun holstered on my hips and let them get their meager belongings and leave. Disgusting freaking goblins. We let one of my coworkers take the extra room they vacated when he lost his home, and by God, he was so much better than my best friend I'd known and helped through losing multiple family members and tried giving him a shot to get ahead in life. Bottom line, they're unemployed, practically homeless, waiting for the birth of a child in debt. I think it's a good revenge and victory for me. You're so lucky they left that easily. No good deed goes unpunished. Be glad you learned this at a young age. Don't forget it. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.